Even though that this show is officially over and the single parallels is almost 3 years old once we reach into the following month, I'm still going to discuss my opinions on this episode, despite that I didn't review nearly every episode from this show. I mean, I've only analyzed the finales, the first 5 episodes of the Steven and Connie shipping, and one episode that was a filler episode that was part of Cartoon Crisis 2. I was originally going to replace this episode with a different episode, but with multiple people discussing about this over the last 3 years, I need to take my take on what I feel about this episode after watching the entire series. For me personally, I really think that this episode can sum up why people just don't like Steven Universe like they did before this episode aired. I would usually talk about the plot of this episode, but for how infamous this is and the beginning and the end of it didn't really catch my attention on the direction of the plot, I really don't need to talk about it. I'm gonna discuss on how the characters in this episode feel mostly betrayed, but also really depressed with the anxiety of holding on to a truth that's been going on for how many years that Paul kept her secret with Pink Diamond. The only thing I can say is that, well, Paul actually gets a phone of her own, it leads to a driving point onto why Steven kept going inside of Paul multiple times in order to find the phone. Going inside Paul to another Paul is just basically the darkest secrets that Paul is dealing with, which I can easily see on the anxiety that Paul is dealing with on keeping her secret for far too long from the Crystal Gems and Steven. And the more Steven continues with his journey in this episode, the episode just gets darker and darker to where we reach to the reveal at the end. I really think that this entire plot involving Steven going inside of Paul multiple times really makes me appreciate of how this episode is just trying to dive someone's personal secrets inside their minds. And I will say, for being a new fan after the show came to an end, and sometimes trying to get into the feel of the environment of what this show is building on, this episode alone is still made me convinced that the episodes before and maybe after instantly ruins the lore of Steven Universe. But I don't 100% agree on that and not on board with that statement. But I'm not going to delay much longer, and you pretty much know I'm going to say that Pink Diamond was Rose Quartz the entire time. Even though that I'm not a fan of the show when it was airing new episodes back then, and me watching the entire series as of now, I really felt that this entire episode really makes the whole show lost most of its identity on how it was building up as becoming a great show since it all started in 2013. And when it came to an end in 2020, the show is memorable, but for the reasons that we didn't expect it to be. I'm gonna get this out of the way. I do not hate Pink Diamond, but I can understand why there's so many people that absolutely despises her, while she has a few fans who made videos involving her into why this episode is surprisingly entertaining and amazing. But for me personally, just like the newer fans of the show, well, minus Misanthropony, I'm in the middle of that category on this show being good or bad, all because of this episode. One of the episode changes that I would change with this episode from my original plan was revealing Storm in the Room, which was pretty much my favorite episodes from this show, but just by watching this episode, reviewing this episode was still important, and the fact that Pink Diamond was Rose Quartz the entire time, I really didn't know how to handle the situation when it comes to how unbelievably demented Pink Diamond is. And I do say that without being sarcastic. When I say that to characters like Pink Diamond, I usually meant it because she really is demented for how selfish and twisted she is. I would discuss literally everything of what she's done, but everyone has already done that for me, so all I can say here is right now is that this reveal makes me really depressed of not only for the other characters in the show, including Steven, but also Paul herself. This may be a bit personal, but when I was getting into the show, one of my favorite characters I liked instantly from the show was Paul, because in the first season, she was brave, sometimes humorous, but also really sympathetic on how she's dealing with the idea that Steven is Rose Quartz, but also just trying to keep a secret from anyone of what just happened between her and Pink Diamond. And you know, as much as I'm not into the LGBT representation in the show, and the fact that she is interested in Rose, I really think that what Miss Anthropoi said in his video is 100% true, and I gotta be real. The more I look at Paul in the show, including Future, she really had the least development, even less than Amethyst. The idea of Paul being Rose's slave, or Pink's slave, I really think that's really depressing that she really didn't do much when it comes to her own independence, and the fact that she's a guardian to Steven, along with Garnet and Amethyst. And whether I completely think about this ideal, it makes me to believe that everything that she does in the earlier seasons after the first season really makes her completely underdeveloped. I would talk about Amethyst, but that's a character for a different time. Even becoming a fan of Last Deal in July, this episode made me convinced that what Steven went through after all these seasons, up until the finale of the show, regardless if I enjoyed it, and I'm talking about Future, it's really depressing that he really had to go through everything in order to fix the messes that his mother caused. If I were ever in Steven's shoes, I would instantly be heartbroken and not have to deal with the fact that I was actually a diamond this whole time and not a gem. Granted, Steven is a gem, but considering that he's also diamond, it's really difficult to pick which side on being a diamond or a gem. This episode honestly gave me more emotions to think of the positives way more than the negatives. And we're going to what I actually think of how this episode is trying to do a subversion. I can say that the subversion actually works. Before you completely comment down below, I need to address on the analysis video that I made 3 months ago involving Change Your Mind and the Future's finale. The more I address those two finales and how it's like those because of this episode alone, I couldn't imagine how the finale would have been like if Rose was actually her own person, while Pink Diamond was never Rose Quartz. I understand whether you agree with me on the trauma that Steven is dealing with in Future is either good or bad, but for me personally, it's always a debate on whether if his trauma that he's dealing with has his excuses on being a terrible person to other people, despite being done poorly. I think it's either a way of having Steven be Pink Diamond for one of the right reasons of what we see involving Pink Diamond's history with Paul, not to mention Yellow and Blue Diamond, including White. Rebecca Sugar having this idea on keeping this reveal until this episode came out, I really think that she actually did it in her own way in order to make this episode give a driving point and mostly a turning point for what Steven Universe is going to go to since the Steven Bond came to an end in May of 2018. I understand that people are really upset by this, and I'm not really a good analysis person when it comes to looking at this show, as in knowing much about the characters, since I need to get more information on that by rewatching these episodes, but that doesn't mean I'm totally against Steven Universe. Because with the negatives that this episode revealed because of the Pink Diamond twist, it actually gave me the positives to think. And we won't be able to have good episodes afterwards, like the reunite or the reunion episode. Well, Ruby and Sapphire get married and get reformed to Garnet, and it was all because of Steven who actually helped Garnet, or them, whatever you prefer. And even though that I did not like the finale of this show, and I'm talking about the original, I can say that it was really entertaining for what it's trying to do, despite with questionable decisions. Same goes to Future in the movie, which I haven't discussed on this channel, but I will in the future. The positives of what this show has, despite the negatives being overshadowing the positives, I still think that this show is still unique by trying to take the risk and the high ground, while at the same time divide the fan base for pretty much the second or third time. If you can say that I'm mostly loyal to the show, no, I'm not really. I mean, as of now, I only made a few videos from this, and it was in multiple episode reviews in each of those videos. This is literally the first time I reviewed an episode from Steven Universe since Ragnarok from November, which was a single episode in one video review. I don't usually want to review episodes in one video involving Steven Universe because I want to give my perspective of what I feel of the character arcs like Steven and Connie along with other plots. But with this episode, it's difficult to address most of the episodes that I consider good from the earlier seasons after you completely watch this episode for the first time. Granted, I can say that the haters have understandable reasons on where they're coming from involving their hatred of this episode, but for me personally, it's not going to stop me. Besides, I'm still thinking about reviewing more episodes from the show regardless of being old news at this point, and I'm not going to have anyone stop me or what I actually like about the qualities of this show. Granted, it's going to take time for me to talk about everything since I don't review all the episodes aside from Friendship is Magic. I'm going to think of the positives more of the negatives because I'm not really a serious hater like everyone else is when it comes to addressing the hatred after this episode. And yes, I'm fully aware that the haters were used to be fans who found the show really great in the earlier seasons. And even though I didn't make this review as much normal like I did when it comes to my other reviews, as in my usual style of fast-paced talking and stuff like that, this episode was really serious and to me somewhat personal since I've watched this episode as part of my binge watching of Steven Universe in general. And from my perspective on the other arcs in this, I can say that it's going to take a long time for me to address what I like about this show and what I do not like about this show. I'm going to give this episode a 7 out of 10. A really odd way to give an episode like this, but I'm trying to be a bit biased on what I actually found good and bad in this episode, if you agree with me or not.
Let's get this started again. Me and my whole crew, we live with no rules. Let's get this started again. So if you feel like me too, there's only one thing to do. Let's go. Pay down, go for taxi cab. Got a case in the fridge and a bottle at the crib. Let's all get twisted, double fisting, drink up the resisting. Let's get this started again. Let's get this started again. Let's